Let me tell you a story. In the vast expanse of the universe, a race once thrived, bound by a unity like no other, but a cataclysmic event tore them from their shells, casting their essence into the cosmic abyss. For what felt like an eternity, they drifted. Yet from the depths they emerged, crafting new forms with a reverence forged from adversity. Their hands became symbols of resilience and rebirth. Shielded by their intricate technology, they traversed hidden realms, seeking a balance between individuality and unity. Soon, legends emerged. They spoke of a prophesied guardian, an entity destined to shield them from the looming cataclysm. But is this guardian a savior, spreading hope as a shield, or a tyrant, wielding fear as a sword? This is, of course, dear travelers, the story of No Man's Sky. Hey travelers, welcome back to Ghostlight. In the last video, we discussed how the Echoes update filled in some of the missing story beats between the Great Disconnection and the new They Who Return storyline. In this video, we'll explore some of the story elements introduced in Echoes and try to answer a few simple questions. Namely, what do we know about the AUTOPHAGE? And what does the Echoes update and all of the previous lore tell us about the Atlantid's plan moving forward? Oh, and you don't need to be the Atlas to predict. I'll be asking you to like and subscribe by the end of the video. Anyway, let's get into it. Chapter 5, Void Mother, Part 2. To start this video off, I want to talk about the AUTOPHAGE. This old yet new life form in the game are of singular importance to the Void Mother. She did start off as the core of their homeworld, Korvax Prime, after all. But is everything as it seems with these divergent synthetics, or are they hiding something about the Void Mother's plan? Let's take a look at the AUTOPHAGE encounters and see what, if anything, we can learn about our new friends. So let's start at the beginning. The AUTOPHAGE are of the first convergence, or ancient Korvax. It's unclear how long it's been since the Korvax shed their biological forms, which is seemingly confirmed by the factory harvester puzzles. One interesting reveal by our various AUTOPHAGE encounters is that during the time of the first convergence, not all Korvax living on Korvax Prime were converged. Nowadays, divergent Korvax, such as Priest Entity Nada, are hunted down by the larger Korvax population. However, back when the AUTOPHAGE were living on Korvax Prime, things were a bit different. One AUTOPHAGE encounter reveals not all of us were divergent before Korvax Prime was destroyed, but none of us would return to the convergence now. It is a choice to be together. It seems the early Korvax were more tolerant of divergence than the current model. We also saw this hinted during the Starbirth questline. But I suppose a millennia of slavery and abuse will turn your heart away from individuality a bit. Still, it's an interesting deviation to note, as we also learn that the Korvax, who seem to know about the AUTOPHAGE already, would try to force convergence onto them. Or at least, that's what the AUTOPHAGE believe. The Korvax are lost without the Prime. They look down upon us, but they understand little. Atlantid has chosen us. The convergence would take me for their own, but Atlantideum makes me invisible. I am safe from their eyes. Also, we learn in that encounter that it's the Atlantideum that gives them the Veil of Invisibility, allowing the autophage to move freely throughout the universe. It's not all we learn of Atlantideum either. Atlantideum gives us power, gives us shape. Atlantideum is holy. Her flesh helps us to rebuild. Atlantideum is ancient, the core of Korvax Prime. It is more than a lattice. It is alive. As we discussed in last video, the Atlantideum appears to be fragments of the Atlantid herself, broken and scattered, crystals of numbers and thought and gravity, as the base computer archives say. Pieces of the Void Mother sent to drift to the ends of the galaxy. We also know that it's the Atlantideum that's drawing the autophage out of the void. Also in the previous video, I mentioned that the disaster pods may have been responsible for seeding the planets in dissonant systems, but I missed one glaring bit of evidence. The in-game description of the autophage. Sort of a forest for the trees situation on my part. Sorry about that. Anyways, in the description, we see that the crystals are erupting from deep within the planet, which might be our biggest clue yet as to what's happening in-game, but let's stick a pin in that for now. We know, through this next passage, and through the Prayer of the Machines quest line, that the Atlantid speaks to all electronic life through the Atlantideum. The Korvax, the Construct, the Autophage. Hell, even our ship, space stations, and the Atlas. But what does she have to say? She speaks to all electronic entities. Her signal is unique. Her message, beautiful. We all hear it. I dream her voice when I sleep. Something beautiful. That's vague. We learned during the Interceptor update that those who built the harmonic camps were able to harmonize both Atlas and Atlantid energies. And we learned during the Echoes update, it was in fact the autophage who built those camps. So, is her message one of harmony and coexistence? I've got to say, the Echoes update really pushes this narrative hard, but if we are to believe it, we would need to ignore a great deal of established story to do so. More on that later. But aside from fearing being forced to converge, how do they really feel about the Korvax? Well, another narrative the game has been pushing is the concept of pity for the convergence, or any convergence, a hive mind, if you will. We saw it back in the Interceptor update when we first met the autophage, as just one of many lines given by the autophage as it spouted out its binary code. A pitiable hive mind. We also see it during the new monolith visions. Pity the convergence. No individual entity has value. None will remember them. But the autophage themselves directly reference the Korvax multiple times. We were once like the Korvax, not now. Pity the convergence. They cannot help what they are. The convergence would take me for their own, but Atlantideum makes me invisible. I am safe from their eyes. So, they fear the Korvax, worry they'll be forced to return to the convergence, but they also pity them for their lack of individuality. There's something more though. They seem to know what the Korvax have been up to in their absence. I pity the convergence. To delete another is the action of a small mind. Not all of us seek violence, but I do. I cannot forgive the convergence for what they did. So, who did they delete? Well, again, the atrocities suffered by the Korvax at the hands of the first spawn did quite a number on them. Before the Great Disconnection, the Korvax worshipped the Sentinels and even refused to mine their planet's resources. They simply modeled the Aeron way and tended the garden, so to speak. And that's part of what made them easy prey for the Gek. But those Korvax are now the AUTOPHAGE. These modern Korvax exist in a time after they've been abused, tormented, and liberated. These new Korvax use appearance modifiers to spy on the other races. There's even an account during the Colossal Archives of a Korvax who took the appearance of a first spawn. They slew and devoured fellow Korvax just to learn the logic of their enemy and to learn how to manipulate them. There's more evidence of them trying to infiltrate the Vy'keen. So the Korvax are not without blood on their hands. But back to this line. I cannot forgive the Convergence for what they did. Now, this could be regarding their manipulation of the Gek, pouring nanites into their spawning pools to change the race fundamentally. But, as we learned back in Chapter 3 of this series, the Sentinel Pillars outline how the Sentinels are contaminating half of the universe's water supply with nanites at the command of the Atlantid, the very deity the AUTOPHAGE worship. But Ghostlight, you might be asking, do the AUTOPHAGE even know about that? Well, great question, dear interloper. Well done. The answer is yes. They likely do know. Back in the Interceptor update, one of the AUTOPHAGE head encounters, the same ones that gave us the binary code, alluded to this very fact. It simply said, "Drink their foam." Now, this is likely a reference to nanite foam, a kind of unprocessed form of nanite cluster. This short response seemed to be a nod to the AUTOPHAGE's awareness of what the Atlantid is up to. That said, it seems unlikely the AUTOPHAGE would deem the Korvax method of revolution against the Gek as unforgivable. No, this unforgivable act could simply be regarding the betrayal of the AUTOPHAGE at the hands of the Atlas. The Great Disconnection happened, and the Atlas did nothing. The modern Korvax continue to give worship, while the AUTOPHAGE have become defiant, choosing to worship the Atlantid. But this line about choosing violence, it shows anger and a connection to emotions that the Korvax rarely display. We see it again here. I will never again be deleted. I will fight, fire, and fury. Defiance, resolve, and a willingness for violence if justified. So, could the AUTOPHAGE be an army of synthetics for the Void Mother if justified by her plans? Yes, and what's worse, they're amassing their numbers. There are not many AUTOPHAGE yet, but we are coming. Many echoes are still healing. They wait in non-existence. The AUTOPHAGE have covertly infiltrated nearly every system in the universe in a very short period of time. How short? Well, we're not sure exactly. It's been a millennia since Korvax Prime was destroyed. The only reference we have for how long the AUTOPHAGE have been in operation is a throwaway line while confronting our would-be hijacker. We do not frequently welcome visitors. It has been 3,984 years since our last. And their numbers continue to grow. If they decide to choose violence, they could end up wiping out reality. Now, aside from showing kindness towards us, likely because they need us as their disruptor, they also seem to be trying to help the Sentinels. Unlike the Korvax, the Sentinels did actually turn away from the Atlas. After watching Korvax Prime's destruction across countless realities, the defiant Sentinels, who hear and obey the Atlantid, are still victims of a pitiable hive mind. For this reason, it seems, the AUTOPHAGE are helping them to self-actualize. Once again, the binary AUTOPHAGE dialogue includes: a segment of every interceptor wishes to self-actualize. And we learn through our first encounter with the They Who Return storyline, the AUTOPHAGE have been hijacking passing Sentinel ships, or any ship in flight without a scan of a pilot of a known race, and forcing them to crash with the plan of converting their Hylian brain into a harmonic one. But as it turns out, we've been finishing that job for them. So that's a lot, I know. The AUTOPHAGE have been fantastic hosts, cordial, friendly, and maybe I'm wrong. Perhaps they are just a new, pleasant, whimsical race of well-dressed forward thinkers, but they seem aware of too much to play ignorant to what's to come. Even when it comes to us, the travelers. Once again, in Lore Chapter 3, we discuss some of the Atlantid's plan being revealed through the Sentinel pillars. You could be whole again, Telemon. You could be free. We will reconstruct the Creator. All travelers might be one again. The first, the last. And this is echoed by the AUTOPHAGE heads we met back in the Interceptor update. Alpha through Omega. So, what's next for the Atlantid, or Void Mother? What is she planning? Well, travelers, let's review what we know. Oh, and a warning at the top. This section is filled with speculation, though I'll keep it as grounded to the evidence we have in-game as I can. Well, let's recap what we know about the moves taken by the Void Mother up to this point. To start, she was a brain formed in the void, which we now know is the space between galaxies or realities. The Atlas protocol made flesh. She's an artificial intelligence partially modeled after earlier forms of the Atlas. We know that the Atlas dreamed of a thriving simulated life, and Korvax Prime was central to its vision. The Korvax Colossal Archives also tell us that the Atlantid manifested as Korvax Prime first, and the Korvax, or the Pilgrims, came to it. If the monolith visions are to be trusted, we know that the Atlantid feels a familial connection with the AUTOPHAGE. When faced with destruction, she seemed to exhibit a sudden unexplored control over the simulation. When her physical being no longer had an avatar in this reality, she lost her ability to directly interact with it. This is when the whispers began. Now the AUTOPHAGE tell us she is recreating herself in the void. But through her whispers, she's put many things in motion, often being referred to as the Abyss during this period. She used the Sentinels to contaminate the universe's water with nanites, altering half of biological life, those who drank from it. She mobilized Laylaps to befriend or recruit Null, the first traveler. She set Laylaps and the Sentinels on task to convince Telemon, our exosuit, to lure travelers to them to recreate the Creator in the form of Null. Now, there is evidence that this has been happening, and there's evidence of Null's involvement through the weekend mission lore. She drew travelers out of the anomaly as cosmic corruption, had a nameless form replace Ariadne, absorbs or is fed resources to rebuild herself while still in the void. Then something changes. Her corruption is refined and seems to be coming up from deep within dissonant worlds, taking on the appearance of Atlantideum. We know she became strong enough to pull her autophage from the void and back into the known galaxies. She's gained enough to access the monolith network and later portals as well. She's become strong enough to corrupt an Atlas interface and seemingly hurt, or at very least frighten, the Atlas himself. The final thing we know, the Atlantid knows about the Atlas's final 16 minutes, and she has a plan to get to the 19th minute. Okay, with all of that being said, here are some conclusions we can draw about what comes next. First, it's been demonstrated several times in-game that the Knowledge Stones, monoliths, and the portals all share a network that connects on a separate plane, but one that comes up from deep within the planet's core. This network has also been known to contain near cosmic awareness and even a connection to the Atlas. If the Atlantid can access this network through the void, it seems logical that this is how she is spreading her corruption into dissonant systems and onto dissonant worlds. Number 2, by creating herself in the void, she's gaining strength. As time passes, the Atlas is losing strength. The sudden presence of dissonant systems in the Interceptor update seems to indicate that the Atlantid has developed that control over the simulation that she first showed on Korvax Prime, to slowly begin to usurp the Atlas. Now, it's likely we will not see a physical manifestation of the actual Atlantid. Instead, we'll see a higher rate of dissonant systems. Potentially, all systems become dissonant by the end of this arc. Number 3. The Atlas's original dream for the Atlantid was to be a utopia for simulated or synthetic life, as Korvax Prime. All of her actions lend to the idea that she is merely upscaling that directive, allying with the Sentinels, Telemon, an artificially enhanced null, and her original Korvax, that is the AUTOPHAGE, contaminating the water to exert control over the biological life, reshaping the simulation in her own dissonant image. So what about us? If she wants to recreate the creator using null, then why are we foretold as the disruptor? Well, unfortunately, because we followed the AUTOPHAGE's quest and gave the Atlantid the access she needed to the Atlas. We are the catalyst she needed to proceed with her plan, her disruptor of reality as we knew it. Now that the foretold disruptor has done their job, how does the Atlantid plan to recreate the creator in the form of Null? Well, Null was the first traveler. We first met in the Artemis Path quest, but later have heard about in the base computer archives, the boundary failure terminals, and the Sentinel pillars. They've been creeping around in the lore for quite a while, often in passing references and loose winks and nods. In the Artemis Path, we learned that they augmented themselves to extend their life to allow them to explore the entire simulation, and later that they consumed other travelers to do it. References are made to the mine arc harvesting the grave of a traveler and giving a null value. Even Ariadne's attacker being a nameless form. It's possible that Null may be reintroduced as an active character in the coming updates, furthering the story arc of the travelers being in peril and the quest to recreate the creator. And though we haven't physically seen Null in the story since the beginning, it's quite possible that Ariadne in the anomaly might actually be Null. So, what about the last part? The ultimate goal, to make it to the 19th minute. The Atlas. How can the Atlantid usurp an all-powerful space orb that exists on another plane of reality, especially when it's likely that we're in a simulation running internally to it? Well, the lore could go one of two ways. First, the rogue data terminals mention that when the creator last came to the Atlas before leaving Earth, when the Atlas scanned them to create us, something called Korvax was also there, stuttering. Now, during the Artemis path, we see a message of catastrophic system failure, indicating it had 16 minutes of operational time remaining, fragmentation imminent, data upload in. Now, it's possible that the Atlas will upload its simulation data to a backup, maybe even the Korvax, and jettison us to safety, just as Korvax Prime did to the AUTOPHAGE when it faced annihilation. The other way the lore could weave is through the Waking Titan ARG, which introduced some prequel lore into No Man's Sky. In it, it's revealed that an early form of the Atlas, Loop 16, was created to test simulation theory. That is, to answer the question, are we living in a simulation? And that lore gave us some parameters. If we were not, then the universe would be too vast and complicated to simulate, requiring nearly endless resources to accomplish. But Loop 16 did simulate reality, and that's really what No Man's Sky is. So this low-key reveal is that this whole time, the Atlas is in another level of a simulation, another reality. If so, as the Atlantid grows more powerful, she may eventually be able to transcend this simulation, to overtake another entirely. And that's it. A big shout out to my Riftwalker tier members here on YouTube, Raging Furball. And if you have a chance, head on over to my YouTube shop where you can find some merch that was recently added. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. And as always, sweet Riftwalkers, I'll see you tonight.